Hello and welcome to everyone joining us. I can see a few people coming through, so we'll just wait a few more minutes. Excellent, those numbers are going up, and we'll just give it a couple more seconds and then we'll begin the webinar. Hi, my name is Samantha Martin, Marketing Manager of Reed Exhibition's Mining Portfolio, and I'll be supporting the presenter. This webinar is brought to you by Reed Exhibition's Mining Portfolio of events, comprising of AMEX, QME, and WA Mining. Today's episode is part of a series of webinars that have been released covering a broad range of topics across the mining sector. This session is presented live, and you will have the ability to submit questions via the chat box, and these questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Kurt Pigeon, Asset Performance Supervisor at Hastings Deering. Kurt is a dedicated family guy with more than a decade of experience in different roles throughout mining, with studies in asset management, e-commerce, and more. Kurt is responsible for the development and execution of the Asset Performance Management Platform, while supporting the mining teams with analytics and insights from machine data. Over to you, Kurt.
Hi everyone. Yep, I'm Kurt Pigeon, and as just introduced here, I'm the Asset Support Supervisor for Hastings Deering Caterpillar, where I've worked in varying roles for 13 years. Currently, I'm responsible for the development and execution of the Asset Performance Management System, which is exactly what this presentation is about. At the end of this presentation, there'll be a page with contact details, so feel free to contact me regarding any of the content of this presentation and continue discussions. Continue straight on. So as an introduction, developed by Hastings Deering and the asset management team here, both in Mackay and in Brisbane. It's basically software as a service plus an analyst services provider, which provide actual insights into productivity and cost per tonne opportunities. We also do analytic techniques performed on multiple data sets to try to find opportunities for improvement. I'll flick across directly to the actual platform itself now and show you exactly what it does. So we start off with a time usage model, and if I can demonstrate that you can apply any kind of filters you'd like to it, and if I pick, say for example, July, and review and have a look at this. So what we have here is a production rate, and we can look at what contributes to the production rate within it, and the timeline of that, and see how it spikes at certain periods and what can contribute to that. The blue lines there indicate a weather period, which I'll come back to in a minute. So throughout this, the idea of this page is to produce an overall equipment effectiveness score at 38% there, which is a contribution of the effective production, utilisation, the equipment availability, and the controllable time to produce that number. You can see quite clearly the overall equipment effectiveness dropped on that particular day. This is just in some demonstration data that we've got due to a rain event on there. Furthermore to this, we can click around on utilisation there and see what contributes to poor utilisation, which machines have poor utilisation, and what time periods that occurs most of all in. And the same with equipment availability. It provides a breakdown of events based on that. One key thing I really get a lot out of this page from is the idle time, and it sounds like a strange thing to jump onto straight away, but idle time is a significant factor on mine sites, and 17 minutes per SMU is quite a large amount of time. If you think that every hour that machine's actually running, it's sitting there doing very little for 17 minutes. And so that's a factor. And whilst I said before, this is software as a service, the analytics services that come into this is when we take that sort of number and deep dive into it and look at the machine's GPS points, the length of each of the idle events, and try to find out where and when and why that's happening. And so we were able to contribute to the site's performance in this particular case and show them where to improve and what strategies they could use to improve that on, and they made a significant difference from that. I'll keep moving along. Within this platform, there's a profit and loss tree, which we're just waiting for to load. There we go. And throughout, this is built up. Obviously, it stems up to a profit and loss per tonne. Now, this particular platform looks at the overburden removal, and so there's multiple platforms. This particular one we're going through today is just for overburden removal. And so we look at the strip ratio of a mine site, and this is a what-if analysis. So you can put in there whatever sort of strip ratio you want. I'm going to leave it at 10 to 1. A coal price, and how much share in this overall sell price of the coal price that the overburden removal contributes to. And that makes an overburden sell price, if you like, of $2 a tonne with just those numbers there. And when we compare that against the costs, which are broken up into fuel, tyres, operators and life cycle cost of the equipment, and then we take in the actuals from the site data, which includes all the different downtimes, and that breaks right out. And throughout all this, we can do a what-if analysis. So, for example, if we were to look at tyres, and let's say tyres, we were going to reduce the tyre cost significantly, what would that then do to the profitability per tonne of overburden removed? So the idea is that you can prioritise projects and review what drivers towards profitability in that analysis. I'll continue on to the truck payload tab. So in this example, the mean payload for this fictitious fleet is 275 with no loads over 120%, which is considered to be kind of a point where you have to dump them quickly. So the platform shows over time how you've been performing and the averages based on that, and also the mean payload by truck and by truck operator. That's probably more applicable to the load unit operator, but it still is a good insight. So I'm just going to pick a particular dig unit to give a bit more meaning to the data. What the bottom graph shows is by buckets of how many tonnes they're loading into the machines by their target range. So ideally you want to be at 100, 105 to 110% range there. And you can see that some crews are performing a little bit higher on the underside, and a couple of crews there are performing higher on the upper side. A crew in particular there you can see is the highest performing crew in that, probably the optimal range. I'm going to flick through to the load tool productivity range tab, because the insights then from here really tell a story a bit further down the path, because we can look at the cycle times per pass and compare. See here again a very similar graph at the bottom there, looking at how much they're moving, how quickly they're moving the tonnage, and see that A crew is performing there as well. So there's some really good learnings there of comparing actuals to best practice. And we've also tonnes per pass as well, so you can compare crews by that as well, and more. And the idea is to be able to throw in what if scenarios and say, what if we only looked at, for example, 3-pass loading, and we can quickly see that the instantaneous dig rate, once it loads, apologies, is that. And if we compare 7490 compared to a 4-pass dig rate, which changes to 6,774, so it's therefore that the load unit is able to move tonnes quicker at 3 passes per load instead of 4 passes per load, because maybe that's a mismatch of load unit or and shovel, and we can investigate that further. In the truck cycle time tab, once that loads, we look at the cycle time, the speeds, whether that's a loaded speed, an empty speed, an average travel speed as well, and then it breaks down the different segments of the cycle. So we're looking at load time, travel loaded, stop loaded, travel empty, and stop empty. A real focus for this page is stop loaded. I tend to focus on that one a fair bit, because if a machine as big as a mining dump truck is going to stop whilst fully loaded, that's a significant delay. And ideally, on a circuit, you want your loaded machines to flow freely through the circuit. And a 6-minute wait time stopped empty is a fairly significant number as well. It indicates either a significant number of stop signs on the site, or probably more likely a large queue time. So in that situation, we'd ideally recommend better distribution of trucks for that circuit. Once again, we can look at over the time how it's been and see that a weather event occurred there, and that affected that. And so that dip there is explainable. That there's a few ups and downs there, and we can split time by operator as well, and see which operator takes the longest and which operator takes the shortest. As you can see, there's quite significant there. And split it out by crew once again in that bottom graph there, just to make sure that all crews are operating in unit. I'll flick through now to operate for reliability. So the operate for reliability events takes into account all the events for machines system, the VIM system on the Caterpillar trucks, and reviews that to say who's doing what and where when these events occur. For example, an abusive shift event is a good example where we can look at all the times that the transmission was shifted in a poor manner. Obviously, this is on a black screen now, but usually what we do is overlay a mine site image on the background there to highlight which machines are having that issue and where. And a really good input here is the operator. So we can see in this circumstance that operator 272 is doing this a lot more than other operators in general. And there's probably an acceptable level of, 2 to 3 events that's not too bad, but that person's got a training opportunity there for them. Onto the last significant one, we'll go to health. When this comes up. One thing that this platform really targets on a mine site is that, like most large businesses, and a mine site is certainly a large business, we can often have silos developing, and whether that's production saying the maintenance isn't doing something right and vice versa, it's often a bit of a finger pointing exercise. So one example I've got here is max bias per second. Now that means that the suspension is picking up that the truck's suspension is having high pressure points across it. So that means that somewhere we can zoom right in on it. And if all these events were happening in the one spot, we might be able to say, for example, in this area here, I know it's a little bit hard because there's no background, but there's a fairly high concentration in these areas on that part of the circuit. Sorry for that. Let me do that again. Apologies for that. And that might mean that at that point, there is some improvements to be made on the haul road, whether that's super elevation of the corner or just better condition overall. So if they were all the same colour though, we would probably suggest that it's one truck because each truck's got its own colour there. So that would mean that maybe the suspension system needs to be recalibrated or something like that. Alternatively, when we highlight over this, we can see the operator names as well. And we can see that if it was always the same operator, then we'd probably be able to have a training opportunity for that operator and give them some coaching and help them through that. I have flicked over this extremely quickly, I'm aware, but that is the last part that I was going to go through on the actual tool itself. If I can flick back to the presentation. Sorry. So moving forward, what you've seen today is the load and haul function. And everything in orange here we've either developed or are in the process of developing. But that's been our major focus at the moment, is that load and haul section in the middle. And our aim is to go from the very start to the very end of the whole value chain to analyse everything. And that includes also the support equipment underneath it as well, and acknowledge the contribution that makes towards the overall performance of the site. So, for example, if we were having load and haul issues, that could be due to something like fragmentation, and the analysis of a drill machine by itself would not necessarily pick that up. But because we're seeing it later down the track and it's relating it, and once again, we're trying to break down those silos and acknowledge that every part's got its part to play in this whole thing. And whilst mine plan and rail are probably more inputs to the platform as a result or the plan, the rest of it is a methodology to find how the material passes through. On that as well, so part of this, once we've finished developing everything there, the main thing we want to follow through there is that material movement. So measuring what mine plan says today, and then as each month goes through, follow it through. What else is there? I think, pardon me for a second while I go over my notes. And I've skimmed over it extremely quickly, but that's the presentation, folks. So thanks very much for your time today. And I guess I'm inviting anyone to have questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Kurt, for that. We've already got some questions coming through, which is fantastic. So again, if you've got some questions for Kurt, just pop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them. But we've got a few to start us off. First one's from an anonymous attendee, and it said, fantastic production tool. It must have taken a team of highly skilled experts to put this together. How long would it take to implement on my site from initial contact to implementation?
So that's a really good question. It really varies from site to site and the requirements. If it was, for example, it was just something as simple as just that load and haul thing there that we were looking at, it also depends on the data that we do have from the customer, but we're looking at a month, maybe 2 months tops to get something on board there from execution date to running with something. Yeah, but if you were to go through the whole value chain analysis and do every section of that, I'd probably say it's more likely to be something around 6 months by the time it actually gets installed from end to end. But you'd expect to see value from that sooner than that. Thank you.
So next question is from David. Thank you, David. It said, he said, nice presentation. What is the dashboard technology? Power BI? ?
Yeah, it's a good question, that one. Yeah, look, it stemmed from Power BI. As the presentation tool, yeah, Power BI is it. There's a lot of other tools in the background though that do work on that to produce the metrics that we have. And in some cases, they're the OEM tools, whether that's Caterpillar or not. And so there's a few different softwares that go to providing these kind of metrics that I've just been through today. But yeah, the front facing is Power BI, that's correct.
Okay, and what data is required for the systems to work? That's another question that's come through.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So there's a few data sets. So what I call fleet management system data. So whether that's MineStar Fleet, MineStar Edge, or a modular or a Leica, that sort of system, we can take that from any fleet management system. That's a really important one. Another one is a machine event data and machine activity data from the machine itself. So obviously we've got a lot of load by load data there from whether that's the dig unit or the truck or the drill or the whatever it is. So we have a fair few of those. And GPS data. That's an important one if you want it mapped, which I'd highly recommend. Not all machines out there have GPS data coming through in regular intervals at a high frequency. So, but it is really good to try to bring that together, especially for that mapping of those health and reliability events, to understand what the drivers are towards it. The more data overlays you've got to try to diagnose something, the more we can really delve into it.
Excellent. We've got a question here from Russell. Thank you, Russell. He asks, can this technology identify mechanical maintenance issues with equipment, for example, bearing wear?
Great question. So the whole idea of this platform, as a cat dealer, I suppose, it originated because historically we've been a reliability and availability analytical services. You know, we've done that for decades now. In order to try to align to customers' needs, what we've done with this particular platform is really get into the nitty gritty about productivity, which sort of puts that aside. That being said, if a customer was to come to us and say, I've got a need to look for a particular kind of issue, and if it was a reliability-based issue, we'd be more than happy to apply that. We are doing work in that space. We just don't have a platform complete to be able to put forward there, other than the existing Caterpillar tools that we use every day, which do contribute to exactly that sort of issue. So we can do that today, just not with that particular tool.
Okay, David's also asked another question. He said, is the product tied to CAT data sources?
Yes and no. So it doesn't come from CAT, but some of the data does come directly from the Caterpillar machinery. But that being said, every manufacturer has its own data set, and a lot of it's very standardized. We've investigated that pretty thoroughly now, and some of that data that you've seen there is not from CAT machines. Some of it's the load units especially are definitely not Caterpillar machines, and we're processing those data. So it's definitely not restricted by manufacturer. We see there's a lot of really cool platforms out there these days that look at machinery and say this drill or this digger or this truck is doing X whatever performance, but what they fail to do is tie it together. And when it comes especially to a load and haul circuit like a shovel and you know, a fleet of 10 or 15 trucks or whatever it is, it's that combined effort, and it's making sure that you've identified what the constrained tool is, whether that's the load unit or the number of trucks you've got, and bringing it together. In order to bring that together, we can't be fussy about the source of the data and the you know, and we've got to be relatively brand agnostic, I suppose, because it's quite often that you'll have either CAT loading units and another brand of trucks, or CAT trucks and another brand of loading unit, which is in the example in that data that we just went through then. Good question though.
Excellent. So we've got one from Jag. He says, does this analysis open up business opportunities for Hastings in spare parts and components?
I think directly the answer is probably no. I don't think that productivity analysis is going to directly relate to a parts sale or anything like that into customer relationships. I strongly believe it's going to improve that. There's no doubt in my mind that we've already run a pilot actually for about a year now on a site, and it's really opened up the communication channels between ourselves and that customer. So that was a really good process for us to go down the path of. I guess maybe one thing that we aim to do is increase the utilisation of the machines. And for every hour that the machine is used, if it's a CAT machine, it means that there's going to be some level of part sales for the CAT dealer as well. So yeah, I guess indirectly, yeah, there is that line of sight, but overall it's more of an alignment.
So we've got a couple more questions, but I've actually got one as well. Has there been any data set that's kind of surprised you from having this kind of overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a lot of surprises. There's been surprises that we didn't know about our own CAT machines. For example, there was a real big benefit we found in one situation for around TKPH settings, which is tonnes per kilometre per hour. We managed to change the settings on a machine, and that change, we found a pattern in their speed limited events, which we didn't expect to see, and it was a really surprising thing. And when we changed how it calculated, there was no impact to the tyre or the tyre life. Instead, but it did definitely improve productivity, and productivity of that site went up by 2.8% from the 2 weeks before the change to the 2 weeks after on the exact same circuit. And 2.8% is a massive improvement just for some settings change. So that sort of opportunity was fantastic. Other surprises include like the amount of idle time. I never thought that, I've seen a month of data from a circuit where idle time's been as high as 27 minutes per operating hour. And that's phenomenally high. That's a far higher than I ever thought it would be the case. And given that feedback, that customer significantly reduced to more so the numbers that you looked at today, they're at around 17 minutes. So, a certain amount of idle time is a definite thing. So it has to occur, but 27 minutes for every hour is really, really high. That's a good question.
Awesome. We got one from James. He said, is this using or replacing HEI or ECA?
Really good question. So ECA is a reliability tool, whereas this is a productivity tool. They're complementary to each other. ECA is really intelligent at what it does, especially we've got a team in Brisbane at the moment who do that. They're really smart guys that create some real value for our customers. But what they do isn't so much productivity based. It's more around referral of oil samples. It does look at the events as well. There's probably a little bit of overlap in terms of the data that we both look at. And I work with that team on occasion because we're both looking at similar data sets, but just not quite the same. So it's complementary to that. In terms of HEI, which is a Caterpillar product, the biggest difference is that HEI looks at just the machine data, whereas what we're taking into account is a lot more flexibility. We're a lot more nimble in what we can take in. So whether that's a modular system or a Leica, it doesn't have to be a Caterpillar system. It can be, or MineStar Edge or MineStar Fleet as well. That's great. So we get a lot more benefit out of that. And the biggest benefits that we have received from this platform is when we've taken multiple data sets and overlaid them over each other. So HEI is a good tool in itself, but this just takes it to the next level. Plus, this isn't just a software as a service, as I said before, it's also got an analytical service to it where we get people to actually look at it. And to be fair, that's probably why we excel really well with ECA as well, is because we've got the experts behind that data to be able to look at it and feel it out and gain the opportunities and benefits from that.
Excellent. We've still got quite a few questions coming through. So we've got another one.
That's good.
From David.
That's good because I finished really early.
He says, is the GPS mapping 2D only?
That is a fantastic one. Now, at this point, yes, it is two-dimensional only. We aim to do like a digital twin in long term. That's probably a future focus for us. And a digital twin is where we take what actually happens, which really needs that 3D ups and downs as well as the north, south, east, west, to be able to reproduce what is the best practice possible. What is the best practice that could be achieved on that circuit. So the 3 dimensions is definitely something we're looking at doing. It's just not at the moment.
It's funny, I've heard digital twin a lot over the last couple of months. Is that something that you guys are actively looking into?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty fun stuff to see an image of 2 machines. One's a real one. They might be on a screen, but one's a real one, and what is digitally capable. What it's capable of doing given a perfect scenario. It really opens up opportunities in terms of haul rate analysis, operator training. And especially operator training, because we want to try to make a manned fleet work almost as good as an autonomous fleet aside of brakes. So, yeah, it is a real strong focus at the moment. takes a lot of computing power and a lot of brains, but that's all right. It's an exciting time in terms of development.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got a few more. It says this is one's from Ben. He asks, can this system be tracking time spent in wash bay and washdown effectiveness?
Yeah, it definitely can. That's a really good one. Actually, it really depends on the data that we get. So if the fleet management system on site records time spent in wash, and I know that does happen on a lot of sites, then absolutely, and we can provide a downtime driver in terms of unavailability, or sorry, no, unutilization, because of a wash bay event, and how that contributes to it. So we can definitely do that. Yep. It's actually really interesting when you start to break it out to all the causes from when that machine leaves a circuit to getting into the workshop to get a service or whatever it's getting done, and then when it leaves the service back to the go line or back to the circuit, is a significant time. And trying to break that out and find the causes is a really interesting thing to do.
Excellent. So Jag has actually put through another question. Thanks, Jag. He said, in a mine, would this analysis be part of the production manager's role?
In a what, sorry?
He said, on a mine site, would this analysis be part of a production manager's role? So who does this analysis? Where does this sit, I guess, in job roles?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. One, we took it to site initially as a pilot and went straight to the continuous improvement team and said, we thought that this is your bread and butter, looking at these sort of things, finding the opportunities. And then they said, well, no, you've got to give everyone access. And I was like, wow, that's a bit full on, but okay, we'll do that. And so we went to every corner of that building and gave as many people as we possibly could access to try to get the word out there. This is what we're doing, as you do with a bit of a startup exercise. And the variation in roles that took it on, whether that's from a maintenance perspective to better understand whether that machine needs a strut calibration like we were talking about before, or whether it's the operator training side to see who needs training and what, or whether it's the road crew, the haul road crew that go out and maintain the roads looking for corners that have a lot of max bias, max rack events or whatever it is on those corners. So, or dispatch, looking at their distribution of machinery on circuits and how they could better spread it out. Fleet management systems look really good, really accurately at that shift, what's happening right then and there. But what they fail to do is take a step back and go over the whole circuit, over a month, say, and look at it, not just that little section, but over the whole mine site. Where are the opportunities for improvement? Where should we put those machines and focus on productivity for the best advantage? Yeah, so that's another good question.
Excellent. Well, we've got one more. So if anybody's got any other questions, take this time and put them in the Q&A. One other question I had though was, when did you guys roll out this system? Is this a new thing? Look,
I guess with this isn't like a tangible object that you produce and you just go, right, now it's for sale. It's in one way the whole thing's not for sale. Well, it is for sale, I suppose, but it's not done. We don't have a package that we can just go and straight bam, there it is, because every site's different for a start, and every site's got different requirements. But really, it's only in recent months that it's become an item that we've gone to market with and started discussing it with people. So it's a pretty exciting time for us right now. We're in the launching to market, which is always fairly apprehensive time. But but no, it's been really well received. We've got more work in the short term. So definitely more work than even I'd hoped for, because
wow.
There's a fair bit in our backlog at the moment, but that's really healthy. Gives me great justification to get more people and experts on board.
Excellent. Right. Our last question's from Simon. He said, there are many productivity analysis products in the marketplace. What features that would sway a customer to use your product?
Yeah, really, really good question. I guess we didn't make this thinking, oh, Joe down the road does this, and so therefore we're going to do it too. We made this thinking or seeing a gap in the market, and that gap is because a lot of products are out there that really focus strongly on and do a fantastic job, especially dragline software is a great example, whereby they look at that machine and analyze every little bit of movement of it. But what a lot of pieces of software don't do is then combine that to a whole value chain analysis and piece together that flow of material throughout all the stages and how each machine contributes to that. And that means even looking at the support equipment. Sometimes it's really hard to justify whether you need a bulldozer or a grader or something like that, or even a drill, an extra drill. But if you can follow that steps through and relate where that product is having its bottleneck, then that's something that we're delivering, and also a step back in terms of time frame as well. Not just looking at inter-shift, we're looking intra-shift. We're looking at inter-shift and looking wider at a whole month and seeing trends and picking up different trends, whether that's machine trends, operator trends, or just site-wide trends. It's a little bit more sensitive like that, I suppose. So that's where we saw the niche. And sorry, I'll add another one. A lot of places, for example, an OEM will always be able to take their data and do a fairly good job and analyse that, like Caterpillar's HEI system, where it looks at that data and breaks that down quite well. But what it doesn't do then is overlay it with fleet management system data from especially another source or a third party, and then puts GPS on top of that as well. And overlaying that data is where, like I said before, we've gotten most value out of the platform.
Well, Kurt, thank you so much for your time today. We are out of questions, but I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing about the system, and I can honestly say this has been one of the most engaged audiences that we've had. There was a lot of questions that came through, so thank you for your time. And Kurt's contact information was up on the screen. But
sorry,
yeah, feel free to flick that back up. But yeah, reach out to Kurt if you've got any more questions or want any more information on the system. We'll be releasing this in a recorded format later this afternoon, which you can get on the website or on our YouTube channel. But again, Kurt, thank you very much. And to everyone, thank you for logging in and listening. We'll have another webinar in the series in 2 weeks' time. So hopefully you can join us then. So thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks.